Hi, everybody. It's Divorce Unplugged podcast. So good to have you guys here. We love our listeners. We love our subscribers and our audience. Today, we are actually going to cover something that I want to have come with a trigger warning. This is going to be a more intense conversation, and it's actually leading back into the first question that we've ever asked everyone in our audience, which is the family court system broken?
I'm Keegan Burke, divorceology from a social media perspective, divorce coach, not a lawyer, not practicing law, doing the disclosure thing, right? Not your lawyer. And
Right.
this isn't legal advice, but today's topic is a heavy one. So,
It's
um,
not legal. And just to let you know, you might recognize me. Here I am again, Nicole Cox, the family law liaison. I am an attorney, but I'm not yours. And I am not giving legal advice today.
I'll open it for us, and then I know you've got some thoughts and things to cover. So, we know that there have been a handful of tragedies in the headlines as of late. And so, really, there's no shortage of horror stories. And, some examples, the father in Washington, the kid in New York, and other cases that generally shake us to our core, right? When children are hurt or injured, it's a whole different level of emotion attached to it. And it's ultimately because we feel like the system failed. And I would argue that they have.
They did. Yeah. And I'm all teared up over here because I think, the biggest case that we just saw, and it has hit me, triggered me specifically, is the one in Wenatchee, Washington. And when we speak of these cases, I just want all of our viewers, our audience to know that to respect the people that have gone through this tragedy, to respect the victims. I'm not going to say names. I may not pronounce them correctly. And we are just here to have an honest conversation and to hopefully shed some light on what happened.
Sure. And so I think the thing that we all want to keep in mind is that while we are looking through the lens of what are the problems, we also want to be considerate of making sure we're not opening up new problems.
Right.
And so, we want to make sure that we are having an open conversation and dialogue around where did the system fail?
Right.
Are there things that we can do? Can we do things individually in our own personal lives? But what can we all do to advocate for a better system so that these types of tragedies don't happen?
Yes, so that not one more child loses a life.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And I'll start just so from a man's perspective, going into this too. And I think I guess it doesn't really matter if you're a man or a woman, but as a man, as what I would consider the protectors of all beings, right? That's the general feeling for men. These are the types of stories and situations that we need to be screaming from the rooftops about, denouncing, advocating against,
Right.
promoting protection and really honoring the people that deserve that protection. Not just only focused on, well, that's going to translate into false allegations and things that will hurt us. They will. So we need to be staying away from it as much as possible. But at the same time, we really need to be supportive of the folks who are abused, who have, I don't know.
Are asking the court system to help
Yeah.
them. So now I'm gonna chime in, and I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I can't
Go.
stop. So I have seen in so many scenarios with my clients, but in this specific situation in Washington, this mother has just taken, like, my heartstrings, and she asked the court system, and this is a problem that we're going to talk about. She asked the court system so many times to get this man a psychological evaluation. She said she did not feel safe. Her kids were not safe with him. And on top of all of that, and I may not have all my facts straight because I'm a little bit emotionally, I get charged on this case. But on top of all of that, he didn't have a place to live. he wasn't he didn't have somewhere for the girls to go that was stable. But the kicker is, and this is where I get really upset, is that he got unsupervised visits. And I want to say it again. He received from a judge in court, in family court in Wenatchee, Washington, unsupervised visits to three very young little girls. I know that's very upsetting to me. And I know that you can hear that, Keegan. But why did he receive the unsupervised visits? Why would a judge decide that that was someone that was fit to be with three children alone?
I don't have the answer.
And I don't think any of us do. But I think it begs the question, what happens when a mother, a father, somebody comes up and says, truthfully, I need this person to have a psychological evaluation. Well, what normally happens in the family court system is, do you have enough money? And no, we won't do it. I mean, these evaluations, just a custody evaluation, I have clients going through custody evaluations for $30 and $50,000. I won't even talk about how much mine was after 17 months. And then still, there's no psychological evaluation that goes into the custody evaluation. So I just need to understand, and I think everybody does right now in America, across the country. We need to understand how judges are deciding whether a parent is fit to have children without supervision.
Yeah, and I think all too often they are subcontracting to these professionals who are making major mistakes in their analysis or evaluation. They are self dealing, they are missing key details, they are ignorant of the facts.
Mhm.
And I would say in some cases they're ignorant of due process just because they aren't held to the same standard of a courtroom. And so there are things that they can't do or they do without certain protections to certain parties. So it's a racket, if you ask me.
Well, and we've used the word racketeering before, right?
Yeah.
And it brings up something totally off topic almost, but there are several evaluators that are being closely looked at, I would say, somewhere in the Southwest, where they were accused of actually using Chat GPT to write evaluations and to do, you know, therapy sessions, notes, whatnot. I think that's a problem. And like we've talked about before, what are we doing with these third parties? I actually have close contacts that are attorneys that said, I'd rather go in front of a judge right now than actually let one of these people make a recommendation for one of my cases when it
Hmm.
comes to custody.
Hmm. Hmm. And so I think the question is, and you brought it up, where do you land on Caden's law and how applicable is it, in this particular circumstance? And then how applicable should it be going forward?
Okay, so that's a great question. I am an absolute proponent for Caden's Law. I have always spoke about that just historically. And I am a big believer in supervised visits. And I know a lot of people are against that. But what is the harm in starting with supervised visits and moving up on a step up plan? Right? If someone truly is exhibiting red flags, mental health issues, y all those things, and there's one issue I think that's a big one in California is to get supervised visits, you have to pay quite a bit of money, you have to find a supervisor, and there are no facilities usually available. So I see that, and there's other issues in every other state on supervised visits. So maybe supervised visits aren't the actual answer, but maybe right now it's a Band-Aid.
That's fair. I think the other thing that creates some problems in that, just functionally, is the time it takes to get a legitimate plan in
Right.
place. Because there are certain ages that lots of things happen and change in short amounts of time, right? And there are some ages where you can go a little bit longer and it doesn't require, or not as many things change in the child's life. And it I think at every level, the challenge is always, well, we want to ensure that the parent has access and contact with their kids. Nobody's looking to take their kids or kids away from any parent, but the kids do need to be safe. They do need to be
They
cared
do.
for. They do need to be protected, assuming that the things that are happening, the things that would provide protection, are
Right.
actually real. Um,
So, and yes, and you made a good point. So, I do think that we're looking at two different problems. Okay. There was a situation in Phoenix, Arizona, a couple, 2, 3 years ago where in court, they didn't look high conflict whatsoever. And all of a sudden, the father decided to, I don't even know how to use the words on our podcast, but he um, took the children's lives, 2 twin babies, and the mother, okay? So, but in court, mother said, "He's mean to me sometimes." Okay, so in those scenarios, if somebody's listening to this, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, and you are concerned that somebody is too mean, speak up in court. Let them know, and don't use the words mean. Say, "I'm really worried for my life, my children's lives." I mean, so there's that side of the coin where maybe some people see it, but they think, "Oh, my partner would never do that to my child." We just saw what happened in back east with the little boy. Who would have thought? And I think and such a young mom, how was she supposed to articulate what was really going on in her life? I don't know.
yep. But here's the thing, right? To me, it's um, these situations in the news right now are, at the kids are at the mercy of the man, and that's a sad existence. But I think the message too that I want to make sure our audience gets is, for the men, the women, statistically speaking, are just as risky in terms of these types of situations. Statistically speaking, right? The murders or the injuries on kids happen just as frequently, if not more, with the moms and the children in the mom's care. So I'm not saying that to blame one side or the other, but what I
Right,
am saying, as a party to the situation, don't just be the tough guy thinking that she's not mean enough or she's not capable of doing harm. You have to be, as a parent, man or woman, the best advocate for your kids'
right,
protection. And so, men, statistically speaking, if it's happening more with women and it's not being reported on, men need to speak up and be doing the things that are necessary to protect against these types of tragedies, whether it's a man or woman in the news or not, right? These are the things that we have to do collectively, all of us, to
right.
protect
Exactly.
our
And we
children.
are just now, and I know that we're don't have all the statistics on what's going on, but just recently we've seen, it's been fathers, unfortunately,
Mhm.
that have been doing this. But is it really just a parent that wants to hurt the other parent and doesn't know any other way to hurt the other parent but to take something that's the most precious thing from them?
Yeah, I think that is definitely a major motivation in some of these cases, and has been over the years. You hear them, occasionally, that the other parent gets so frustrated that they want to injure or harm the other parent, and they use the kids to do it.
And then let's talk about something else. So, what do we do with? Because I think this is a good question as well. And we can open this up to our audience and our viewers, our listeners. What do we think that should happen to these judges that are handing over, like in the Washington case? I want to also bring up another case. There's one in Wisconsin where a protective parent, and again, it was a mother, the protective parent was in a situation where the child was being abused, ran to protective mom, and now the courts have put her in jail. This is a horrifying thing. And I think aside from focusing on mom versus dad, we talk about protective parents. And
Mhm.
protective parents need to be listened to in court. And if they're not, then should judges be accountable? And how would they be accountable?
I don't know how we'd hold them accountable other than taking them off the bench.
Right.
But they receive so much power from the bench that they're very hard to reach. And family law, generally speaking, is so discretionary, right?
Hmm.
We get statutes and codes, and we're supposed to follow the guidelines and the rule of law. But
Right.
these judges all the time can go in a complete opposite direction on the code or the law and make a discretionary argument or interpret it through a
Right.
different lens. And
Right.
when they issue their rulings, they do so in a way that they're literally issuing the ruling in preparation to defend an appeal.
Well, and here's what happened in Wisconsin is that she won in appeals court, mom did, and then the lower court, family court came back and said, "No,"
Mhm.
and still put her in jail.
Yeah,
So, I mean, and this is that's a crazy case. That happens, I would say, probably not very often. I don't know how that was even allowed. Um, but, we're seeing it right now in Arizona where
mhm,
our legislation is now again listening and hearing and doing trials and listening to people. And I'm actually going to post one of the people that testified yesterday. She was an expert witness and she was all the way from New Jersey. She flew all the way to Arizona to talk. And I'm kind of amazed by the state that they're allowing people to do this and listening to everyone's cases because they want to change and fix family court and they want to do things in 2026 better. So I think that's a great thing. But I'm going to post it because she literally talked about how she feels. And she's an expert witness, and she's been in more than like, I don't know, it was almost 50 states that she's been an expert witness. And she said, like, absolutely, across the board, every single family court system is broken.
100%. Couldn't
Yeah.
agree more. This does take me to just anecdotally a question that I want to ask you just because I'm curious. Um, and I wrote it down. If someone has been a domestic violence abuser, um, do you feel like they can be a good mother or father of the children?
You had to ask that, didn't you? Okay. So I think everybody, our viewers, our listeners, our audience, I think we all know. I think my answer is no, because I think that it trickles down. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that a domestic violence abuser is going to physically abuse the kids, but there is definitely maybe going to be mental abuse. So I don't feel like unless they get a lot of help, rehabilitation, and therapy, that they can be good parents. I do think that at some point they will end up abusing. And also, let's keep in mind that if a child has already seen a parent abuse another parent, that's child abuse.
Mhm. Yeah, I would tend to agree there. The fallout is where it gets muddy, without a doubt, right? The the question is, and maybe just because I've seen through people that I've known over the years, parents who have been abusive of one another in one form or shape, or one shape or form, and still they're good parents to the kids, right? They're not experiencing, physical or mental abuse. But to your point, if it's in the presence of the kids or there are other things afoot, does that create trauma on the children over time? And I think that's probably a reasonable expectation that it does. And but I don't know that it actually lands for me in terms of a black and white answer. They can or can't be a good parent, right? Because then we have to ask, well, what makes a good parent, right? individually, right? If they're not in the presence of the party they were abusing, or had abused, are they, and they're not abusing the children, or they're not mentally abusing the children, can they care for and be a provider, protector, caregiver, and all of the things? I don't know the answer. It's a tough one.
And I'm listening to you and I'm taking in what you're saying, but I think that empirical evidence will show that most serious domestic violence abusers of a mother or a father cannot actually be a good, healthy, fit parent.
I can't disagree with that in its whole. And I'm not saying, my response isn't necessarily defending the abuser. Let me tell you that.
Right.
Because we're all against that. But I was just curious, and I think that you make some really great points on it. I think the flip side, though, right? Let's just open it up to the flip side of that thought. Is it abuse? Let's start with, is it abuse to make false allegations of abuse? And can the parent making false allegations of abuse be a good parent?
Well, that's a great question because I do have a case where where I've seen that and several that I worked on in like back east in North Carolina. And it gets to the point where, well, if somebody's making that many false allegations and you know that those false allegations are hurting your child, can you be a good parent? Then you need some help,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Yeah. And we talked about this offline, and I liked your perspective on it. It was that we need to instill some level of, not necessarily reciprocal outcomes, but punitive response
Right.
and accountability, so that if somebody is taking on a false allegation, they're not doing so knowing that they're never going to be held to account for making a false allegation,
Right.
because the damage of that allegation is so drastic if it
Oh,
lands.
I've seen, I mean, and one of the cases I was talking about was the false allegation was, sexual abuse, SA of the child. And she was made to believe growing up her whole life that that's what had happened. And it actually hurt the child more, obviously, believing that. So to me, that was child abuse and that woman should have had punitive, and we don't know still what's about to happen.
Right.
That's a very complicated, high conflict case that I work on. And you made a good point. Yes, absolutely. There should be some repercussions and there should be accountability on both sides.
Yeah. So I think in closing on this topic, right? Some key things that I take away, and then I want your final thoughts. The things that jump out at me: abuse is real, right? The system
Right.
is broken. It's failed a number of families, especially recently.
Yes.
It abuse destroys all lives, false or true, right? Um, and unfortunately, the system is really bad at differentiating the 2, right?
Right.
That's why it fails us all the time. Um, and at the end of the day, we all need to figure out a better way to protect the kids
Mhm.
and due process at the same time.
Correct. So for me, the takeaway is, and this is something an initiative that I've been pushing, is judges. They just need more education.
Mhm.
So do the people that are doing the evaluations. And attorneys need to also be on point when they see something because there could be an emergency temporary order filed quickly if there's unstable things that another parent are exhibiting. But also, again, judges need to be more educated on these things. And maybe not just one judge, maybe two judges make the decision. I don't know. But we need to stop handing children over without supervision to people that are exhibiting behaviors that look unsafe.
Fair, fair.
That's kind of that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for everyone that's listened to us today, I hope that there was something that you gathered that made sense, that you gave value, we gave value to you. It was a hard discussion to have, and definitely continue to listen, like, and subscribe, and we will see you soon.
Thanks for listening.